Welcome to an accurate history of the Bronze Age collapse.
Mostly accurate.
You know how people say it can always get worse? The Bronze Age was a time when half the people died before puberty, there was no clean water, and everyone wiped their butts with sand.
And yet they still found a way for it to suck more.
During the collapse, you've got drought, plague, famine, volcanoes, and more Greek seamen than anyone should have to deal with. In episode 2 of this series, you'll learn about the Hittite Empire, who controlled everything from western Turkey to ancient Mesopotamia. The Hittites were a peace-loving culture who spread wisdom and education throughout the known— I'm just kidding, they were a bunch of warmongering assholes, who kept power with a potent combination of heavy armor, heavy chariots, and heavy-handed punishment for anyone that stepped out of line. The Hittites spring up around 1800 BC in the middle of the Bronze Age and take the Old World by storm. Established kingdoms like Babylonia and Egypt had controlled the Middle East and North Africa through a system of sub-princes and satrapies, employing thousands of lightly armored locals to fight on their behalf. The name of the company might change, but the local managers, or kings in this case, would usually stay the same. With the Hittites, though, it was all Hittite or nothing. They were the original hardcore culture who took everybody else's ideas and then used them against them. Case in point, the Egyptian war chariot. Fast, nimble, lightweight, and kind of crap on anything other than sand. To use them, pharaohs would have their drivers ride them around while they shot arrows at any peasants in plinking range. But when the Hittites got a hold of one, they put the chop shop special on it, moving the axle forward so the chariot's center of weight was over top of the wheels, and slapping on new skinny tires and spinning rims. By increasing the spoke count to 6, they could make the wheels lighter, and the whole thing moved faster. Then, they added extra power by strapping a third man to the back. He'd hang off the rear for extra balance during tight turns and stab anyone that got too close in the face with an extra long spear. These aftermarket chariot conversions made them lighter, faster, and more maneuverable. With this dedication to the latest in chariot-based technologies, the Hittites supplanted tribes, kingdoms, and empires in their wake. Anytime you're the most powerful kingdom in the world, though, you become a target. And when the Bronze Age collapse began around 1200 BC, their leader was Suppiluliuma II, who is remembered as the last great high king of the Hittites. Suppi II had begun his career by defeating the island of Cyprus in the first naval battle ever recorded in history, proudly carrying on the age-old Hittite ruler tradition of crushing anyone in stomping distance.
But anytime you turn your back on your empire in the Bronze Age,
a would-be usurper pops up. The Hittite Empire always tried to place blood relatives of the royal family in charge of any of their provinces. Theoretically, this made them trustworthy, but as we've already seen, it also gave people with a claim to the throne direct access to it.
Blood is thicker than water, but you'll drown in it the same either way.
Karunta was king of Tarhuntassa and the surrounding countryside. It was a minor power within the Hittites, but a scant 100 years before, it had briefly been the capital of the entire empire. Karunta spent most of his life reconquering lost territory for the Hittites, only to find himself passed over for the crown as a different branch of the family came to power. This cadet branch displacement left Karunta a cranky old man whose name roughly means he of the head horn, which is why he's wearing antlers here. In fact, pointy hats were all the rage in the Hittite Empire, and Suppiluliuma himself is sporting a bullish set seen in depictions of one of their storm gods. Sadly, no amount of mutual love for horned headwear could stop these two from fighting. Karunta wasn't happy playing second fiddle, and he began to use the title of Great King on all of his seals. Seals that are even found in the capital city of Hattusa itself, where a bronze tablet bearing them was sent to Suppiluliuma as a declaration of independence. To show what he thought about that, Suppi had the tablet buried under a paved road at the southern gate, so that anyone entering the city would step on it, and any animals relieving themselves on the road would reinforce his disdain. By declaring himself as High King, Karunta brought the full power of the northern Hittite Empire down on himself. Suppiluliuma swooped in like his storm god headwear and sacked his own city, wiping Tarhuntassa from history so thoroughly that we're still not sure where it even was. But at the same time, the Sea Peoples had reappeared. No longer disparate tribes, but a confederated fleet of marauders. who began a calculated tour of the Mediterranean coastline, raiding their way east and south, claiming Suppiluliuma's recently added island of Cyprus for themselves, and cutting the Hittites off from any trade routes that reached the sea. But Suppiluliuma was in no position to stop them.
The arrival of the Sea Peoples in 1190 BC coincides with a series of natural disasters in the Western Mediterranean. Drought, famine, plague, if it hits Egypt in the Old Testament, it pops up here.
Whether it was from a volcanic eruption or a climatic shift, something changed in the weather of the Western Mediterranean. Some areas got too much rain, others too little. During the reign of Ramses II, wells had to be dug increasingly deeper just to keep desert trade routes open. But by Merneptah's time, they were completely dry, and desperate Bedouin and Libyan tribes were fighting to reach the waters of the Nile just to stay alive.
And this didn't last just a single year. There's evidence for an entire decade of drought and famine.
When people aren't getting enough food, their bodies weakened and disease runs rampant. There's even evidence for the arrival of an early form of the bubonic plague.
That's the same disease that wiped out a third of Europe and ended feudalism. So it's no wonder it could precipitate the Bronze Age collapse as well.
Whatever the reasons, the result was mass movements of people. Kings tried to assure their subjects that things would get better, but when they didn't, many were unwilling to sit around and starve. They instead turned to banditry, and when that dried up, fled on ships to find better lands. That's how the Sea Peoples Confederation grew from an annoyance to a world-ending event. Grain and food supplies were often collected as taxes in Bronze Age empires. These food taxes would then be kept in royal storehouses in the capital cities. Cities like Hattusa, the seat of Suppiluliuma and the Hittite Empire. During times of peace, these tributes would fund work projects, and the entire region would prosper. But during a time of famine,
it made them a target so large that even Stevie Wonder could hit it.
Already controlling the shores, the Sea People's horde of invaders now moved inland. Unable to field a large enough army to repel them, Suppiluliuma played a desperate card:
diplomacy.
Messages were sent throughout the Mediterranean to ask for help, but with Egypt in the grip of a civil war and everyone else fighting their own famines, none came. In 1190 BC, Suppiluliuma made the tough call and evacuated the capital city of Hattusa. It's said that Suppi II stayed behind and defended it to the last, going down with the city like the horde of hairy seamen who went down on him. Hattusa was looted and burned to the ground.
The fall of the Hittite Empire had a ripple effect across the ancient world.
Everywhere they went, the Sea Peoples left anarchy in their wake, toppling governments like dominoes. And now they turned south towards the lands of Canaan, where the local Egyptian officials begged for help as the kingdom splintered around them. But they were told to cover their own butts in this era of microskirts, because back in Egypt, it had been a turbulent 10 years. But that's the story for episode 3 of this mostly accurate history of the Bronze Age collapse.